dusty road stretches through the heart of rural Alabama, flanked by towering pines and fields that seem to whisper secrets with every gust of wind. You're driving, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that twist and dance like figures just out of sight. Then you see it, a faded sign, barely legible, reading "Burnt Corn." You slow down, curious. Why would a place be named after something so strange, so violent? Burnt Corn, Alabama isn't just a quirky name on a map. It's a place where history and horror collide, where the echoes of the past refuse to stay silent. Today, I'm going to take you deep into the heart of Burnt Corn, a tiny community with a name that hides a chilling story and 5 haunted places that'll make your skin crawl. So, buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. And if you're the kind of person who likes the strange, the dark, and the downright creepy, you're in the right place. Burnt Corn, Alabama sits astride Monroe and Conacher counties, a speck of a town with maybe 300 souls spread across 5 square miles. It's one of the oldest settlements in the state, older than Alabama itself. Born in the days of the Mississippi Territory when Creek Indians, traders, and settlers crossed paths along ancient trails. The old federal road, a lifeline connecting Georgia to the wild frontier, ran right through here, and at its heart was Burnt Corn Spring, a crystal clear water source that drew people like moths to a flame. But don't let the quaint name fool you. This place is soaked in stories of fire, betrayal, and blood. The name Burnt Corn alone raises questions. Why burnt? Why corn? Was it an accident, an act of vengeance, or something else entirely? As we dig into the secrets of this place, you'll see why Burnt Corn isn't just a footnote in history. It's a place where the past refuses to stay buried. Let's start with the name. There's no single tidy explanation for why this place is called Burnt Corn, but every theory is drenched in mystery and menace. The first story goes back to the early 1800s, a time when tensions between white settlers and the Creek Nation were a powder keg waiting for a spark. One tale says settlers, hungry for land, torched Creek cornfields to drive them out, leaving blackened stalks and a name that stuck like a scar. But flip the story, and you hear whispers that the Creeks struck back, burning settlers' corn cribs to send a message. This is our land. Either way, the image of flames devouring golden crops under a moonlit sky is enough to make you wonder what else burned here and what lingered in the ashes. Then there's the story of James Cornell's, a trader who set up shop near Burnt Corn Spring before 1813. Cornell's wasn't just any trader. He was a man who walked the line between worlds, dealing with both settlers and Creeks. But in the summer of 1813, a war party of 280 Creek warriors, part of the Red Stick faction, came through on their way to Pensacola to arm up with the Spanish. They didn't take kindly to Cornell's presence. According to a historical marker put up by the Alabama Historical Association in 2012, they burned his corn cribs and his home to the ground. Some say they even took his wife, trading her in Pensacola for a blanket. The fire left more than charred wood. It left a mark on the land, a name that carried the weight of betrayal and loss. But here's the creepy part. Some locals swear that on quiet nights near the spring, you can still smell smoke, even when there's no fire in sight. And sometimes, just at the edge of your vision, a figure watches from the trees. Another tale, reported in the Alabama Lawyer in 1997, tells of a lone Creek traveler left sick by his companions near Burnt Corn Spring. They gave him a pile of corn to sustain him, but when he recovered and moved on, he left the corn behind. Someone, maybe another traveler, maybe a settler, burned it in a campfire, and the scorched remains gave the place its name. But here's where it gets weird. People walking that same path today say they found piles of corn kernels, untouched, in the middle of nowhere. No farms nearby, no explanation, just corn, sitting there like an offering to something or someone, watching from the shadows. These stories all point to one thing. Burnt Corn is a place where fire and conflict left a mark, not just on the land, but on something deeper. The Creek War of 1813, 1814, which kicked off with the Battle of Burnt Corn Creek, about 20 miles south in Escambia County, added more fuel to the fire. That battle saw US forces ambush a Creek party, only to be driven back in a bloody counterattack. The war that followed tore through the region, leaving death and destruction in its wake. Forts, trading posts, and homes, like those in Burnt Corn, became battlegrounds. And where there's blood, there's often something else. Stories of ghosts, of spirits that can't let go. But it's not just the war. Burnt Corn's history is layered with other secrets. The old federal road was a highway for more than trade. It was a path for outlaws, deserters, and wanderers. Some say runaway slaves hid in the woods here, their spirits still lingering where they found brief freedom. Others whisper of a darker secret. A forgotten burial ground near the spring, possibly creek or even older, disturbed by settlers who didn't know what they were tampering with. Locals don't talk about it much, but if you ask the right person at the right time, like an old-timer at the Monroe County Heritage Museum, they'll tell you about strange lights in the woods, voices in the wind, and a feeling that something's always watching. Now, before we dive into the 5 haunted places, let me set the stage. Burnt Corn is small, isolated, and old. Its buildings, like Lurie's General Store and the Burnt Corn Methodist Church, are time capsules. Frozen in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the air here feels heavy, like it's holding on to every scream, every whisper, every moment of pain. And when the sun sets, the shadows seem to move just a little too much. So let's get into it. The 5 most haunted places in Burnt Corn, Alabama, where the past isn't just history, it's alive. The 5 haunted places of Burnt Corn, Alabama. 1. Burnt Corn Spring, the ghostly heart of the town. Imagine, you're standing by a quiet spring. The water's so clear, you can see every pebble at the bottom. It's dusk, and the air is thick with the scent of pine and something else. Something acrid, like smoke. This is Burnt Corn Spring, the lifeblood of the community since its earliest days. It's where traders stopped, where creeks camped, and where James Cornell's life went up in flames. But this spring isn't just a historical landmark. It's the epicenter of Burnt Corn's darkest secrets. And if the stories are true, it's home to spirits that have been here for centuries. Let's go back to 1813. James Cornell's, a trader with a knack for surviving in a dangerous world, built his home near this spring. He was a man who knew the risks of living on the edge of Creek territory, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened. That summer, a Red Stick war party swept through, torching his corn cribs and his house. The fire was so intense it left blackened scars on the earth, and some say Cornell's screams echoed through the night as he watched everything he'd built turn to ash. His wife, taken and traded, was never seen again, at least not in the flesh. Fast forward to today, and locals say the spring is different. The water still flows, but there's a heaviness to the place, like the air itself is holding its breath. Take Sarah, a hiker who visited Burnt Corn in 2019, looking for historical sites along the old federal road. She'd heard about the spring and wanted to see it for herself. As she approached, she noticed the temperature drop, not just a little, but enough to make her shiver in the Alabama heat. She set up her camera to take some photos, but when she looked through the lens, she saw something that made her heart stop. Standing at the edge of the spring was a woman in a tattered dress, her face obscured by shadow. Sarah lowered the camera, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the woman was gone. When she checked her photos later, there was nothing but the spring, except for one image, where a faint, smoky outline stood exactly where the woman had been. But it's not just the woman. Others have reported hearing a man's voice near the spring, shouting words they can't quite make out. Some say it's James Cornell's, still raging at the loss of his home. Others think it's a Creek warrior, one of the many who passed through here during the war, warning intruders to stay away. And then there's the smoke. On still nights, when the moon is high, people swear they smell burning corn, sharp and unmistakable, even though there's no fire for miles. One local, an older man named Earl, who's lived in Burnt Corn his whole life, told me he once saw a pile of corn kernels by the spring, arranged in a perfect circle. He kicked them away, thinking it was a prank, but when he came back the next day, they were there again, untouched, as if the ground itself had spit them back out. The creepiest story, though, comes from a group of teenagers in the 1990s. They decided to camp near the spring, drawn by rumors of its haunted reputation. Around midnight, their campfire started acting strange, flaring up, then dying down, like something was messing with it. Then they heard it, a low, rhythmic chanting, like a song in a language they didn't understand. They grabbed their flashlights and scanned the trees, but there was nothing, just darkness. The chanting grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was coming from the spring itself. Panicked, they packed up and ran. But one of them, a kid named Jake, swears he saw a figure rise out of the water, a tall, shadowy man with glowing eyes, holding a burning stalk of corn. They never went back, and Jake still won't talk about it without shaking. What's going on at Burnt Corn Spring? Is it James Cornell's, trapped in an endless loop of rage? Or is it something older, maybe a creek spirit tied to the land, disturbed by centuries of violence? Whatever it is, the spring isn't just a place to fill your water bottle. It's a place where the veil between worlds feels paper thin, and if you linger too long, you might just meet someone or something that's been waiting for you. 2. Lowry's General Store, the shop where time stands. Still now, let's walk down Burnt Corn's main drag, if you can call it that, to a weathered two-story building that looks like it hasn't changed since the 19th century. This is Lowry's General Store, 91, by James K. Kaiser. It's the kind of place where you'd expect to find dusty jars of candy and old-timey tools, but it's also got a reputation for something far less wholesome. This store, which served as Burnt Corn's post office until 2002, is said to be haunted by a presence that doesn't take kindly to visitors poking around after dark. Back in its heyday, Lowry's was the heart of Burnt Corn. It was where people came to buy supplies, swap stories, and escape the isolation of rural life. But it wasn't all warm and fuzzy. The store saw its share of drama, arguments over debts, shady deals, even rumors of a robbery gone wrong in the early 1900s. One story says a man named Amos, a regular who owed the store more than he could pay, got into a heated argument with the owner one night. Things turned violent, and Amos was never seen again. The official story? He left town, but locals whispered that his body was buried under the store's floorboards, and his spirit never left. Fast forward to 2005. A woman named Clara, a history buff from Mobile, was researching old Alabama stores and got permission to explore Lowry's after hours. The building was empty, its shelves long since cleared, but the air felt heavy, like it was holding on to every conversation that ever happened there. Clara was taking notes when she heard a sound, like coins clinking in a cash register. She froze. The store hadn't had a working register in decades. She followed the sound to the back room, where the old post office counter stood. The clinking stopped, but then she felt it, a cold hand brushing her shoulder. She spun around, expecting to see someone, but the room was empty. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a man in overalls, his face twisted in anger, standing behind the counter. She blinked, and he was gone. Clara left in a hurry, but when she checked her recorder later, she found something chilling. A faint voice saying, "Pay what you owe." Other visitors have reported similar experiences. Footsteps creak on the second floor when no one's up there. Objects, like an old tin can or a rusty nail, move from one shelf to another overnight. And then there's the shadow. Multiple people, including a maintenance worker in 2010, have seen a tall, dark figure standing in the doorway at closing time, only to vanish when they turn on the light. The worker, a guy named Tom, said it felt like the figure was sizing him up, like it was deciding whether he belonged. Tom quit the next day. But the most disturbing incident happened in 1998, when a group of paranormal investigators from Birmingham set up shop in the store. They brought cameras, EMF meters, the whole deal. Around 2 a.m., their equipment started going haywire. batteries draining, cameras shutting off. Then they heard a loud crash, like a shelf collapsing. They ran to the main room, expecting to find a mess, but everything was in place, except for one thing. A single rusted knife was lying in the middle of the floor, its blade pointed toward the door. No one had seen it before, and no one could explain how it got there. The investigators packed up and left, but one of them later claimed they caught a voice on their audio recorder saying, "Get out. Is it Amos? Still angry about his unpaid debts? Or is it something else, tied to the store's century of secrets?" Lowry's General Store is on the Alabama Register of Landmarks and Heritage, but it's not just a piece of history. It's a place where the past feels alive, watching from the shadows, waiting for you to make one wrong move. 3. Burnt Corn Methodist Church. Whispers in the pews. Next, let's step into the Burnt Corn Methodist Church, a small white building built around 1913. It's the kind of place you'd picture in a postcard, simple, serene, with a steeple that pierces the Alabama sky. But don't let the peaceful vibe fool you. This church, another landmark on the Alabama Register, has a reputation for being one of the creepiest spots in Burnt Corn. People say the pews hold more than just memories. They hold spirits that never left. Churches are supposed to be places of comfort, but in Burnt Corn, the Methodist Church has seen its share of sorrow. Built just after the turn of the century, it served a community scarred by the Creek War, the Civil War, and the hardscrabble life of rural Alabama. Funerals were common here, and the church's small cemetery holds graves dating back to the 1800s. One story, passed down through generations, tells of a woman named Eliza, a devout member of the congregation who lost her entire family to a fever in the 1920s. Eliza spent her final years sitting alone in the church, praying for her loved ones' souls. When she died, they buried her in the cemetery, but some say she never left the pews. In 2014, a pastor named Reverend Daniels was preparing the church for a rare evening service. The building was empty, or so he thought. As he arranged hymnals, he heard a soft voice, a woman's voice, singing a hymn he didn't recognize. He followed the sound to the front pew, but no one was there. The singing stopped, but then he felt a cold breath on his neck, like someone was standing right behind him. He turned, heart pounding, but the church was empty. Later, when he described the voice to an older congregant, she went pale. "That's Eliza," she said. "She sings when she's restless." But Eliza isn't the only spirit here. Visitors to the church have reported seeing shadowy figures sitting in the pews, only to vanish when approached. In 2008, a photographer named Lisa was taking pictures of the church for a historical society project. She was alone, snapping photos of the altar, when her camera suddenly froze. She checked the screen and saw something that made her blood run cold. A faint, translucent figure of a woman in a long dress sitting in the back row. Lisa took a deep breath and looked up, but the pew was empty. When she reviewed her photos later, the figure was gone, but every picture of the altar had a strange, smoky haze that hadn't been there before. The creepiest incident happened in the 1980s, when a group of kids snuck into the church on a dare. They were messing around, laughing, when the organ started playing, a slow, mournful tune that filled the room. They froze, staring at the organ, which was covered in dust and hadn't been touched in years. Then the lights flickered, and one of the kids, a girl named Emily, screamed. She said she saw a woman in a white dress standing at the altar, her face twisted in grief, holding what looked like a bundle of cloth. The kids bolted, and Emily refused to go near the church again. Years later, she told her story to a local historian, who wondered if the bundle was a symbol of Eliza's lost children. What's haunting the Burnt Corn Methodist Church? Is it Eliza, forever mourning her family? Or is it something older, tied to the land's vile past? The church still holds services occasionally, but even the most devout say they feel watched. If you visit, sit quietly in the pews and listen. You might hear a hymn no one's sung in decades, or feel a cold hand on your shoulder, reminding you that some prayers are never answered. 4. Bethany Baptist Church. the cemetery that never sleeps. Just down the road from the Methodist Church is another historic gem, Bethany Baptist Church, built in 1874. It's older, smaller, and somehow even creepier. With its weathered wooden exterior and a cemetery that's been there since the Civil War, this place feels like it's holding on to secrets too heavy to let go. If the Methodist Church is about grief, Bethany Baptist is about unrest. Spirits that don't just linger, but seem angry, like they're trapped in a moment they can't escape. Bethany was built during Reconstruction, a time when Alabama was reeling from the Civil War. The church served families who'd lost sons, brothers, and husbands, and its cemetery is filled with unmarked graves. Some say soldiers, others say victims of disease or violence. One story stands out: a Confederate soldier named Thomas, who returned to Burnt Corn after the war, broken and bitter. He'd fought at Shiloh, seen things no one should see, and came back to a town that felt like a graveyard itself. Thomas took to drinking, wandering the woods, and one night he walked into the church and never came out. The official story is he drank himself to death, but locals say he was found hanging from the rafters, a rope around his neck, and a look of terror on his face. In 2003, a couple named Mark and Jenny were driving through Burnt Corn and stopped to check out the church. It was late afternoon, and the cemetery caught their eye, overgrown, with headstones tilting like broken teeth. As they walked among the graves, Jenny felt a tug on her sleeve, like a child trying to get her attention. She turned, but no one was there. Mark laughed it off, but then they both heard it, a low, guttural moan coming from the church. They peeked inside, expecting to find an animal or maybe a prankster, but the building was empty. Then the door slammed shut behind them, locking them inside. They pounded on it, shouting, until it finally swung open on its own. When they got back to their car, they found scratches on the door, deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before. The cemetery is where things get really weird. In 2017, a group of ghost hunters from Mobile set up cameras and audio recorders around the graves. They didn't expect much, but around 1 a.m., their equipment picked up something chilling. A man's voice, clear as day, saying, "Get off my land."
They played it back thinking it was a local messing with them, but the voice had a strange hollow quality, like it was coming from underwater. When they checked their video footage, they saw orbs, bright floating lights, moving between the headstones. One of the hunters, a woman named Rachel, said she felt a hand grab her ankle as she stood near an unmarked grave, nearly pulling her down. But the most terrifying story comes from 1995, when a man named Carl, a descendant of one of Burnt Corn's founding families, decided to visit his ancestors' graves. He was alone, paying his respects, when he heard footsteps crunching through the grass. He looked up, expecting to see another visitor, but instead he saw a man in a tattered Confederate uniform, his face gaunt and his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The figure pointed at Carl and said, "You shouldn't be here." Carl ran, tripping over roots, and when he looked back, the figure was gone. But his car wouldn't start for hours, like something was holding him there. Is it Thomas, the broken soldier, still guarding his resting place? Or is it the restless spirits of others buried here, disturbed by the wars and hardships that marked their lives? Bethany Baptist Church is a place where the dead seem to have a lot to say, and if you visit, you'd better tread lightly, because some of them don't want you there. King Criswell Garrett Mansion, the house that watches you. Our final stop is the King Criswell Garrett Mansion, a sprawling 9,000 square foot behemoth on Highway 59 and Orchard Road in Monroe County. Built in the late 1850s by Dr. William H. King, nephew of Vice President William Rufus King, this plantation-style home is the granddaddy of Burnt Corn's haunted sites. Featured on the paranormal TV show The Dead Files, it's got a reputation that draws ghost hunters from across the South. This isn't just a house, it's a place where the walls seem to breathe, and the past is always watching. Dr. King built the mansion as a showpiece, but the Civil War cut his plans short. The house was scaled back, but it still stood as a symbol of wealth and power. During the war, it served as a makeshift hospital, where wounded soldiers, Union and Confederate, were treated, and many died. The mansion's history is murky, with stories of cruel overseers, enslaved people who suffered in its shadows, and a family torn apart by loss. After Dr. King's death, the house passed through owners, each adding to its dark legacy. By the 20th century, it was a decaying relic, its halls filled with whispers of the dead. In 2011, a paranormal investigator named Mike, part of the team featured on the Dead Files, spent a night in the mansion. He wasn't a skeptic, but he wasn't prepared for what he found. As he walked through the grand foyer, he heard footsteps on the staircase. Slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing. He followed the sound, but the stairs were empty. Then his EMF meter spiked, and his flashlight flickered out. In the darkness, he saw them. Shadowy figures, men in tattered uniforms, trying to break through the front door. Mike's partner, Amy, a psychic, later said the house was a vortex of energy, filled with spirits of soldiers, enslaved people, and even children, all trapped in a loop of pain. Locals have their own stories. In the 1980s, a family renting the mansion reported seeing a woman in a white dress standing at the end of a hallway, holding a candle. She'd appear for a moment, then vanish, leaving the smell of wax behind. Another resident, a man named David, said he woke up one night to find a child's face staring at him from the foot of his bed, pale, with empty eyes. He moved out a week later. Even delivery drivers avoid the place, saying they feel like something's watching them from the windows, even when the house is empty. The most chilling incident happened in 2007, when a group of teenagers broke into the mansion on a dare. They were exploring the second floor when they heard a woman scream, blood-curdling like she was being attacked. They ran toward the sound, thinking someone was hurt, but found only an empty room. Then the lights went out, and they heard footsteps circling them in the dark. One of the kids, a girl named Kayla, said she felt hands grab her shoulders, pushing her toward the stairs. They fled, but Kayla had nightmares for months, always seeing the same woman in white, her face twisted in agony. What's haunting the King Criswell Garrett mansion? Is it the soldiers who died in its halls, still fighting a war long over? Is it the spirits of those who suffered under its roof, seeking justice? Or is it something darker, something that feeds on the fear of anyone who steps inside? The mansion is private property now, but if you get permission to visit, don't go alone. And if you hear a scream, don't follow it, because you might not come back.